I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, 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 but maybe it was. I mean, it could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
Donald Trump has never believed that Russia meddled in the election. He's never believed the conclusions of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees all 17 U.S. intelligence agencies. He's never believed them that Russia meddled in the election. You know who he does believe? Vladimir Putin. He believes President Vladimir Putin. Earlier this morning, Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One en route to Hanoi, quote, he said he absolutely did not meddle in our election. He did not do what they're saying he did. Every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that. And I believe. I really believe when he tells me that I really believe that he tells me that. He means it. But he says, I didn't do that. I think he's very insulted by it. It's very hard to read Donald Trump because the syntax. Joining me now is MSNBC national security analyst Evelyn Farkas, former federal prosecutor Paul Butler, Malcolm Nance, executive director of the Terror Asymmetrics Project, Sarah Kendzior, journalist and scholar of authoritarian states, as well as Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee. I just made you a senator, Congressman Swalwell, but I'm going to go to you first anyway. Thanks, in your former capacity as a congressman. Donald Trump, did you think that you would live to see the day? I'll phrase it this way. When the President of the United States would take the word of former KGB agent and Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin over the word of his own U.S. intelligence services?
Joy, it just makes you ask, who is he not willing to betray over this issue, as long as it perpetuates the myth that Russia had nothing to do with electing him? He's betrayed the intelligence community who put the report together. He's now betrayed, I think, his oath to protect and defend our country and our Constitution, and he's siding with a foreign adversary. It is an absolute betrayal, and I think it's just a devastating message to those who toil away here in the United States and abroad to protect our country, that he is siding with Vladimir Putin and taking him just at his word.
What do you expect to hear from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle in response to that? Because normally, the Republican Party for a long time have felt that they owned these national security issues. They were the party that was for, peace through strength during the Reagan era. Now you have a Republican president of the United States siding with a foreign adversary over these intelligence services that work so hard and defend this country. Do you expect to hear any outrage or umbrage from the other side of the aisle?
Joy, I don't have to predict what they're going to do, because I saw just this past week what they will do. We were in a Judiciary Committee hearing, and we were legislating around the Section 702, that's foreign surveillance. It was our first time in a long time to update that, and taking a lesson learned from our own investigation into the Russian interference, I wrote legislation that said if we observe any foreigners trying to meddle in our elections, we immediately have to notify Congress. I wrote this because I think one of the failures of the Obama administration was they didn't tell Congress soon enough, they didn't tell the public soon enough, and I thought this is one way to make sure that Congress knows as soon as something like this were to happen again. Every single Republican voted against it, and the chairman of the committee said that he wouldn't support it because it was a partisan amendment. Joy, I asked him, I said, what is partisan about just wanting to know if foreigners are meddling in our election? I'm afraid that they've just really buried their head in the sand because any talk of election interference they think is delegitimizing a president.
I want to, it is pretty striking, Evelyn, that you do now have this sort of partisan, you now have to put partisanship in the mix when you talk about questions of basic national security.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd see the day when an American president would side with Vladimir Putin, former KGB agent Vladimir Putin, over the American intelligence services?
Never. So my last job was in the Obama administration. I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, responsible for Russia and the kind of successor states of that region, Eastern Europe, et cetera. And we had Republicans and Democrats, I think, understanding what the policy was towards Russia. We didn't have a breakdown along party lines. Now, we got it a little bit wrong because we thought we could cooperate with Russia. We didn't understand that Vladimir Putin was going to really be an adversary to the point where he would do a high-risk operation against the United States elections. We didn't get that. But once that became public, once we knew that, I continue to be shocked that the president can maintain this position that somehow the intelligence community is wrong.
Yeah.
The only people who know what Russia did are the Russian intelligence agents and our intelligence agents, you know, and so it's appalling to me that they try to dismiss it. The Russians, of course, their modus operandi is just keep going, pretend nothing happened. Yeah. But they lie about everything. I mean, they're in violation of a nuclear treaty with us right now. They lied about invading Crimea in Ukraine and then later admitted it, not too far afterwards. They lied about what they were doing in the rest of eastern Ukraine. You know, Putin lies time and time again. There's no reason to believe him. Very quickly, before I move on, I want to put a pin in something that the congressman just said. Should the Obama administration have been more aggressive about telling the public about what they knew was going on in terms of Russian interference? Even though I'll make the point that Republicans like Mitch McConnell threatened the White House that if you go forward, we're going to say you're just trying to swing the election. Right. I mean, I think what I was worried about, because I was no longer in government during this time period, but what I was worried about was that the Obama administration was not informing Congress in the fullest fashion that they could. It turns out that they were, and at least on one side of the aisle, they weren't interested in hearing the truth. Right. So I think that's a bigger issue. Telling the public, yes, I think the public needed to know more, and I would have advocated, had I been in the administration, for telling the public more. But, you know, I do also understand the various things that they were juggling in the White House, the various other considerations. They didn't want to make it seem political. Etc. Yeah, other countries.
And Donald Trump, Joy, Donald Trump had said that the election was going to be rigged, and to the Obama administration's credit, they didn't want to play into that bogus claim. Yeah, I totally get that. I want to go to Malcolm Nance really quickly, because this Russian operation, and you said it time and time again, was incredibly successful in that they managed to place as National Security Advisor of the United States somebody who had taken a check from Russia, taken a check from the leadership there in Russia. And it also turned out that Michael Flynn was taking checks from other folks. And this is a pretty shocking story. It is a news story, but it turns out that Robert Mueller is investigating former White House National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's alleged role essentially to kidnap, to forcibly remove a Muslim cleric living in the United States and deliver him, rendition him to Turkey in return for millions of dollars, according to people familiar with the investigation. Both this cleric is named Fethullah Gulen. He's a political rival of the Turkish president, the autocrat Tayyip Erdogan. Lawyers for Flynn have dismissed the allegations as false, but both Flynn and his son are essentially accused of a kidnapping plot for cash that he would have been plotting while the sitting National Security Advisor of the United States. Malcolm Nance, your thoughts?
Well, it's simple. I mean, if this is proven, if it's borne out, you're going to see the indictments very soon. And what I think you'll see is the former Director of Defense Intelligence, the former National Security Advisor to the United States, arrested for participating in a plot to abduct a U.S. resident and rendition him privately for money to a foreign power. And, you know, this goes hand in hand with everything else that was going on with Mike Flynn and his son, his involvement with Russia, his seeming involvement with the Russian foreign minister when we were kicking out spies from the United States. This is so incredible that what we have here, and it goes to Donald Trump's remarks to Vladimir Putin, we have moved so far away from them being a whole bunch of innocents abroad and just, you know, looking out for their own personal interests that I'm really flabbergasted. I really think that we are at a national level Benedict Arnold moment going on here. We have a president literally on Veterans Day insulting the entirety of intelligence and siding with a former director of the KGB, FSB. But, you know, all of this together, taken as one team, shows me that there was a continuing criminal enterprise, and Russia is at the center of it, and the president has violated his oath by maintaining this fraud that none of this is true. And when it's borne out, it's going to be well past impeachable.
Yes, indeed. I want to thank Malcolm Nance. I think we are losing Malcolm's satellite. He is overseas, and that was the reason for that bit of a delay. So, Malcolm Nance, I'm going to thank you and move on to our panel. I want to go to Sarah Kendzior on this question of Vladimir Putin being able to say to the President of the United States, no, I didn't do it. I didn't interfere in the election. And that's good enough for the President of the United States on Veterans Day. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's, you know, it's the same thing that Trump has been doing and that Putin have been doing from the beginning, which is continually lying about this while also being quite blatant, and quite audacious in their proclamations, such as last year when, Trump asked, Putin to give the hacked Hillary Clinton emails to him to help him, promised he'd be rewarded, to things he's done in office, like bringing, Russian representatives into the Oval Office and giving state secrets. I mean, there's no shame here. There's no sense of propriety. There's no sense of legality. There's just, the audacity of an autocrat, and he thinks that he'll get away with it. So, yeah, I think, Malcolm said it well. We're well at the point, past the point of a, typical impeachment process. We're at a historical juncture.
And, Paul Butler, the question is whether or not this is merely distasteful. And I think particularly to any veteran, it should be distasteful that the American president would side with a foreign autocrat over the intelligence services that work hard every day to protect this country. Whatever people will individually think of the CIA or the NSA and their history, these are professionals that are working, they are Americans, and at minimum side with the Americans over the Russian. But maybe he doesn't want to do that. Yeah. But the question is whether or not any of it is criminal, and whether or not there is going to be criminal liability attached, both to Donald Trump himself, to people like Michael Flynn, who apparently had this kidnapping. You go down and you go to Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary of the United States, who has his own ties to Putin's cronies. The Commerce Secretary retained investments in his shipping firm with business ties directly to Vladimir Putin's inner circle. He also led a private bailout of the Bank of Cyprus, which has long been regarded as a financial haven for wealthy Russians. After the worldwide economic crisis crippled the Cypriot banking system, you have senior members of this administration with ties to Putin. You have Trump with ties and believes Putin. At what point does the distasteful cross into criminal?
When they lie about it, when they fail to reveal it, when they're asked, when they swear under oath that it didn't happen. And so, yes, the Russians lie. Guess who else is lying? Pretty much every Trump campaign operative who is asked, did you have contact with the Russians, says no. And then we find out it's not true. So this week it's Carter Page. Last week it was George Papadopoulos, Sessions, Trump Jr., Kushner. The question is, why are these people not revealing what's going on with the Russians? The strategy of the special counsel is to make this pattern of everybody covering up, not disclosing their meetings with the Russians, and then with Trump, why is he lying? Again, he was able to say that no one in my campaign contacted the Russians. There were never any discussions. We know that is absolutely not true. The question is, what's Trump trying to cover up, or is he just so clueless that he doesn't know that his campaign officials are doing this highly unorthodox thing of meeting with Russians to try to elect Donald Trump as the next president of the United States?
And we do have one instance, Paul, in which Donald Trump is personally intervening to fix the story of his son as to why he's taking that meeting with somebody who then turns out to have been using talking points that were connected to talking points in Russia, and in which they were supposedly being promised dirt on Hillary Clinton. And I think the question for a lot of people who watch the show, a lot of people who, who tune in, is at what point does the criminal liability attach to him? Lots of people who seem to be in some trouble. Paul Manafort seems to be in trouble. Michael Flynn and his son, they seem to be in trouble. Maybe even Jared Kushner, who knows? At what point does Trump have the liability, and can he be prosecuted for any of this? Yeah,
so again, I think Special Counsel Mueller is very seriously looking at obstruction of justice charges. So Steve Miller, who's in the White House now, had a little sit down to talk about this letter that he ginned up about why Comey should be fired. And apparently it was too transparent because it admitted that it was about the Russians. So the White House counsel said, no, that's not a go. And that's when they made this move of going to Rod Rosenstein at the Justice Department to come up with another reason. So again, if you're trying to impede an investigation about Russian interference in your campaign, that's a federal crime.
Yeah.
So what Comey is, Sessions, what Mueller is doing now.
So many of them.
There are.
And then there's the question on the national security side. Obviously, there's nothing that anybody can really do about it. But does the intelligence service, do the intelligence services at some point push back and say, wait a minute, we're right here?
They should, but the problem is that you've seen Pompeo be very cautious, and so with the head of the CIA director, he's been very cautious. And frankly speaking, the DNI, Mr. Coates, Dan Coates, former Senator Coates, he's also very quiet. So we don't really see them pushing back and publicly, at least, defending the intelligence community. Hopefully, they're doing it in private.
And in fact, Pompeo, the CIA director, was meeting with a conspiracy theorist who was giving an alternate theory to the interference. I want to end with the congressman, because we know there's not going to be impeachment. We know that your colleagues on the other side of the aisle aren't interested in doing that. Should Democrats be more explicitly pitching to voters that that your party needs control of the House of Representatives in order for there to ever be a meaningful investigation of Russiagate?
Yes, Joy, and the American people are with us. A poll came out earlier in the week that showed over 65% of the country is concerned about President Trump and his contacts with Russia. And I think if we pitch this to the American people, that this is not about the last election, it's about our freedom to choose in the next one, and that we will have the checks and balances to make sure that we hold this administration accountable and that we always protect our democracy, I think they're going to give us the responsibility to lead. Of course, we have to, supplement that with health care and make sure that we're on their side when it comes to, middle-class tax cuts. But I really do believe this freedom to choose is what this is about, and they're with us. We just have to make sure that we show them we're for them.
Yeah, I would suspect that the majority of the American people believe American intelligence services over Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump is not among them. Evelyn Farkas, Paul Butler, Sarah Kendzior, Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you very much. Appreciate you all, and thanks to Malcolm as well. And up next, the great Lawrence O'Donnell joins me live. You do not want to miss that.